All right. Hello to everyone at the Grolier tonight, both in person and online. I'm Ben Bellet, a graduate student here at Harvard and a huge fan of the Grolier. I'm honored to be here introducing our poets this evening. Partridge Boswell, Chard DeNiord, and Shanta Lee. In order to reduce tripping hazards at the Grolier, I'm going to be just introducing all of the poets in the order in which they'll read before we get started, and then we'll just go straight down the line. In the past, I introduced a poet, and then they'd read, and then I'd introduce, and there were many near misses when this place got packed. So we're all about safety first here at the Grolier. As I move through these introductions, there is one thing that I'm pretty sure our poets have in common. And you'll notice as the introductions proceed that they all have various connections to the state of Vermont. So I don't know how that's going to play out, but for what that's worth, that's the extent of my critical effort here. Partridge Boswell's first book of poems, Some Far Country, was selected by Ifeanyi Menkiti for the Grolier Discovery Award. His poems appear in the Saguaro Poetry Prize-winning chapbook, Not Yet a Jedi, and in Poetry, Gettysburg Review, Salmagundi, American Poetry Review, Poetry Ireland Review, Prairie Schooner, The Moth, and others. Co-founder of Bookstock Literary Festival, he teaches at Vallum Society for Education in Arts and Letters in Montreal, and troubadours widely, with the poetry music group Los Lorcas, whose debut release, Last Night in America, is available on Thunder Ridge Records. He lives with his family in Vermont. Chard DeNiord is the author of 7 books of poetry, In My Unknowing, University of Pittsburgh Press 2020, and Interstate, University of Pittsburgh Press 2015, among them. In addition to his books of poetry, he is also the author of 2 books of interviews with eminent American poets titled Sad Friends, Drowned Lovers, Stapled Songs, Conversations and Reflections on 20th Century Poetry, Marick Press 2011, and I Would Lie to You If I Could, University of Pittsburgh Press 2018. He served as Poet Laureate of Vermont from 2015 to 2019, and he lives in Westminster West, Vermont, with his wife, Liz. Shanta Lee is an award-winning artist who works in different mediums as a photographer, writer across genres, and a public intellectual. She is the author of the poetry collection, Ghetto Claustrophobia, Dreaming of Mama While Trying to Speak Woman in Woke Tongues, which won the 2020 DeNiord Press Full-Length Book Prize and the 2021 Vermont Book Award. She is also the author of an illustrated collection, Black Metamorphoses, Etruscan Press 2023. Dark Goddess, an exploration of the sacred feminine, her latest exhibition, is on view at the Fleming Museum of Art. So we'll start off with Partridge Boswell.
Well, thank you, Ben, for that fine introduction. And thanks to James for arranging all this for us. Wow. Okay, well, it's wonderful, as always, to be back here at the Grolier. I'm particularly excited to be this evening. Oh, I forgot to bring a copy of it. Silly me. To be launching this evening my brand new chapbook, Not Yet a Jedi. And for those of you in Zoomland, yeah, it's been a while since I've published one of these books, and feels really great. It's especially wonderful to be doing that this evening in the company of some extraordinary poets from Vermont. Say the only thing we probably should have done was carpool. And then We could have gotten to know each other a little bit better, but no, it's very nice to be here with Shanta, who is a fellow practitioner of entanglement, as she describes herself, and also with Chard, who I've known for some time now, and just thinking about the very first time I had the pleasure of introducing him to our community in Vermont. For that reading, he did something that I'd never seen a poet do, actually, and he began the reading by reading a poem by one of the other poets who was reading that evening. It was such a gracious and generous gesture that it's kind of stuck with me. And if you don't mind, Chard, I'm going to borrow a page from your playbook and begin my reading tonight by reading a poem by a poet who is very much with us this evening, Ifeanyi Menkiti, from his marvelous posthumous volume, Coming to America. Light. Albert Einstein had himself a theory, and after this, the knowledge which we had of the physical universe, it was not to be the same again. For the more we saw of light, the more that light became like a big juju, impenetrable, even with all of the light around light. And now for Not Yet a Jedi. We'll begin at the beginning. Are we here? Unschooling the hustle in your basement, a bell-bottom universe flares. Your mirror ball world begins to spin when you ask Laura O'Riordan to the church dance. Night's diorama dilates, displacing tender shards. Your black-lit heart blooms luminous in the blue dark. No one tells you this will make you stronger. No one says, have fun proving relativity wrong. Your kids will actually do better without you. Who says that? Some geek charting another numb notch on the spectrum must not hail from around here. No one local gathers rice from the wedding to boil for the wake. Sparks of a mirrored orb you unjive and scatter again. No one tests the telemetry from mother to child, the milk of a blind eye. A ride on Space Mountain, eternally hurtling through a wormhole of hairy celerity, lasts a few seconds before reality abandons quotations again. You glue a fractured mosaic, a prism to gyre and gimble on curfew's scrim, grooving the parish hall in a holy kaleidoscope of disco ball stained glass. Waves of moog crash over your folded tables and chairs stacked to one side. Your wallflower universe, too weird not to be trusted, too wondrous not to don shades and boogie the velvet night away. Here's one where I usually ask folks if they know, if they remember a bloke named Evel Knievel. Is there any even a ripple of recognition in the room? I think so. Anyway, he figures into this. He figures into this poem. It's called Papa Wheelie. From oil-dank bowels of a nightmare garage, you ride benighted. Saturday morning's acolyte, sleep-dazed but aright. Straight for the ramp you built last night in your driveway. In homage to the great adrenaline-hazed Evel Knievel. Archetype for every danger boy and boneheaded troglodyte bent on a bright schematic. vying to break more bones than the Guinness World Record, flying prone over cars, buses, lions, fountains, sharks, canyons, rattlesnakes before the neighborhood wakes. Topping the slope, you rev your banana bike and pedal hard on the approach, past a hushed gang of squirrels and robins holding their breath, half hoping this levitation will and won't be your last. Did he always wear stars and stripes? Was his helmet screwed on tight? Will his next attempt be televised? If he succeeds and fails yet again to reach the light. Devil dared and fair warned, you rocket as advertised off a wood plank sailing headlong over fame's Coliseum into your first kiss and beer and Eucharist, your first dorm room farewell and first rock concert at the Orpheum, your body's first chemistry experiments and first storm of contrite indignation shadowing your first arrest, your firstborn silence like a warm ghost, your island that formed in a widening ocean after your first greyhound pulled away from the curb, taking a friend more than a friend, inevitable as the first long days that followed, soaring through every stunt since, angling for the abyss, realizing too late your trajectory's off by an inch. And this is going to hurt. You brace yourself for that embrace. Some of you might hear E. Cummings or Spinoza in this next one. It's called Ode to Westminster Street. And actually, Chard, you're probably going to recognize the location of this. We do not know what a body can do. How when she crossed the street asking you for $1 so she could get something to eat, you fished in your pocket, pulled a 20 from a sheaf of bills and said, "This is all I have." "Bless you. You have a good night," she said, and took your hand in both of hers before drifting off into an unconscious city, the wind eddying in doorways of vacant buildings. We do not know the bottom of surrender, swirling our fingers in an oily reflection. Hope and courage are rolls of unused tickets, bequeathed to wide-eyed children as we leave the fair. She wore a dress striped black and white, as if darkness were imprisoned or light. Impossible to tell which caused effect or cause, her body and mind knifing one kinesis. Her burning thought and infinite blood inhabiting the same sword of illusion as she crossed the empty street. We were dreaming with our eyes open, confabulating our nimble, inadequate ideas while strolling after sushi back to campus. Her arms were bare, the air still warm enough to empathize without caring, though the season was turning, about to betray itself. First the leaves, then snow, giving for once a soft white dam. Then birds vanishing into clouds, taking our naive assumptions with them. Well, if you've ever been to Dingle in Kerry, Ireland, you may have visited this very small, nondescript stone chapel. It's kind of tucked away off the beaten track, and that figures into this next poem. That's called "Upon Hearing Amy Winehouse at St. James Church in Dingle." Grief without song could be any stone chapel built of loss, packed with aging villagers, lulled reticent as rue by a rote bell's tongue, hemmed by iron gates, and a yew tree lurking mirthlessly beside a burial ground where moss-patinaed saints and earth angels gather round relic icons of threadbare hand-me-down faith. You sit, kneel, stand on your misericord, and eat in Job in the organ belly's drone, sorting your parents' hoarded aggregate, clothes, pawn and charity shops won't take, sewing kits, boxes of old Polaroids of anonymous sepia people you wouldn't be here without, file drawers of past taxes, uniforms from the war, a wedding dress, unworn shoes unfit for a holy soul, and that's just the tip to say nil of unspeakable sins in attic and basement. Macular shorebirds scan whitecaps for questions the mind's eye can alight. Dim synapse of a candlelit nave, musted kneelers, a deacon's chair from Suriname. Grief without song is wasted pain. According to patron James, faith in works, in real acts of creation, amplifies our part in salvation's soundtrack louder than wafers, wine, or words of mumbled expiation dissolved on penitent tongues. In your rusted anechoic husk, your veins blood thrum a rushing river hymn, an electric fence of nerves ticking in your cerebellum until silence clears its throat. And from her first chthonic tremolo, it comes as no shock how from Galway to Summerhill, churches are being repurposed as concert halls by clergy who swear love's lost call note still lingers, runic under the moored murmur of all those services you sat unmoved through. The supernal flatulence of organ bellows at last revised in fidelity rare as a black velvet angel with spindly legs and mental hair. Her aqueous blues beguiling as the B-side of prayer beside an ocean we couldn't hear, but always knew was there. Well, this next one's for all you gardeners. It's that time again, isn't it? It's called Ode to Invasive Species. You'll need a cement jaw, gloves of thick rawhide, and bomb-proof canvas pants, a sharp spade, maybe a pick to prise soil loose around the base, a mild day after a night of rain to soften their resolve, an intolerant epithet or two to remind them who owns the sun and rain, nutrient-rich loam here merely on loan. Loppers alone won't do. You'll need to grab low, yank and wrench, maybe even dig, before roots unscrew their tapered lengths from rhizomatic depths, lukewarm and dark as the womb of a surrogate who consents to birth, but not to motherhood. You'll need a uniform conservation corps of eager, unformed youth who won't connect the green sweat of just another summer job with an angry mob's generic objective, who will hear in their names only the thorn in buckthorn, the strife in loose strife, the knot in knotweed, the suck in honeysuckle, the Russian in Russian olive, the false in false indigo, the heave in tree of heaven. Access to a 24/7 news channel might help. But since your genocide's low-tech, all you really need is the hook of a melody's veiled invective, catchy as Sweet Home Alabama, where kudzu runs more rampant than whatever genus crooned the land back to sleep after the Centennial Exposition, where the miraculous new plant was first introduced, along with the telephone and typewriter and their unborn progeny of devices that are now more endemic than air. Well, I couldn't really launch a book without reading its title track, could I? And imagine, if you will, the voice of Master Yoda reading this. Not yet a Jedi. So certain are you, and yet still work to be done there is. Yet thanked your mother for being her son, you've not. Not yet a Wookiee found you can trust, nor yet a millennial falcon fired up, nor the leap to light speed made, nor your lightsaber switch to stun. Not yet a star discovered that bled or crushed not anyone from the inside out. Not yet your father's darkness forced onto the couch. Not yet the workforce vetted for like-minded freedom fighters, traitors, and insurgents. Not yet Foo Fighters heard live, nor mashed the whites of their eyes to see. Luminous beings are we. Not yet baptized by the taste of mama's manna fried. Not yet teleported from the Starship Enterprise. Not yet crisscross applesauce singing small children's songs in a circle set. Not yet old enough to vote or emerge from your hole, your shadow to behold. Yet a world without money or mirrors hung you've not, nor from your arms the glue and feathers washed. Especially to you, the second law of thermodynamics applies, yet accepted you have not.
When 900 years you reach, look this good, you will not.
And I am actually very pleased to say I am going to see the Foo Fighters for the very first time next month, right across the river. They're going to be here in the Boston Colony. So that's a nice coincidence. I just had to mention. I'll read one more. Thanks again to the Grolier for putting this together and for having me and making this an auspicious launch. Strike anywhere. It starts innocently enough, waiting for dinner to live up to the boast of its aroma. Teleportation, invisibility cloak, the ability to fly, our young waxwing all but shouts. I'd have speed so fast I could turn back the clock, his brother sallies, sinking his mind's meteoric veerings now that he's off Ritalin. What about you, they ask. What superpower would you have? Russia, I tease, but they don't laugh and leave me crouched in a fetal ball beneath my school desk, ears cupped to muffle a siren's wail. Thumbs, I'd settle for thumbs, but they don't want to hear from Darwin or Nietzsche. They want my own real POV, an honest answer on a serious subject. I'm fumbling around in a box of blue tip matches the gods let us steal as a consolation for celestial passion. The tip flares and instantly the boys are my age, and I'm trying to parse for them wisdom from lies. What would do the most good and least harm? Saying sorry for all I've felt and haven't said? Would I want to die again and again and come back each time more grateful than the last? Didn't Hendrix say, when the power of love overcomes the love of power, then the world will know peace? Or was that Lenin? Either way, it was definitely Yoko who said, a dream you dream alone is only a dream. A dream you dream together is reality. I could be Orpheus, able to warm the coldest stone with a few notes, to lift the lowest among us or sing anyone down off their loftiest ledge with a hit so heartrending it reminds us we were loved once and we'll love again. A music so strong it sucks the in out of inhumanity, voicing what we're capable of, drowning out disappointment's self-fulfilling loop of canned music. But which Orpheus? The one before or after he finds a minor key? Or after he's torn apart? I strike another match and light a candle. They're hungry, so we tuck in around the table, drawn by the surging urge Icarus felt as he soared toward the light that conjured us. Our capes and masks draped over the backs of our chairs. Here we are. This is us. The tender, peppery leaves of rocket, croutons crispy yet soft. I know, but don't say what power I wouldn't want to see into their futures. Our hands are open and empty. Our plan, a scrap of light we keep in our pocket. Which superpower? Here's a hint. There's only one. Thanks so much.
Well, what a privilege to read here. I've always wanted to read here, this sacred place of memorable language. The oldest, I think, poetry bookstore in the country. Am I correct, Ben? Yeah, James, yeah.
In the country, maybe the world.
Maybe the world. This little niche, in Cambridge, with so much just incredible language here and poets who've read here over the years. I wish it another, 100, 200 years of existence. I'm going to read just a few poems from my most recent books and a new manuscript here. And a collaborator of mine is here this evening also, Brian Cohen, who's a master printmaker and artist, also from the Putney area. We taught together at the Putney School for many years and have collaborated for going on 30 years now. And we've just published a book called Bestiary, which combines both my poems and Brian's prints. And Brian's brought some of those books, so you can see them a little later. I'm going to ask him to come up and I read a few poems from it. I'm going to start with a poem that is appropriately titled April for this month, Poetry Month, the cruelest month, the Poetry Month. April, there is a new quality in the air, a sweet redolence from the first flowers and pungent odor in the soil emerging from the thaw, that smell that spring passes under your nose to wake you again. More than wake you, stir you in such a way that you recall the irony that kills, the shadow in the droop, the upswing on the ward. How strangely and therefore divinely your mind suddenly turns in its thinking of your soul as a cloud that assumes a panoply of mystical forms, including a Chinese mirror in which your body suddenly appears as a vast array of creatures, ant, trout, hawk, gazelle, and so on. You laugh and a flower blooms beside a door in a meadow that opens onto a darkness so deep no light can light it. That is the zero by which everything in the world is multiplied at dusk. I live far out in the country next to a farmer who's 92, named Ed Temple. And he sneaks up on me every once in a while down in the meadow. And this is a poem about Ed sneaking up on me while I was cutting up an ash that had fallen over from the ash borer disease. It's called Late Work in Early Winter. I felled an ash yesterday that dropped in the stream below the house with a thud. My neighbor heard from across his field where he was digging post holes for a fence to keep his cows from getting out again. Plenty of fire in that one, he said, startling me from behind after walking over in the din of my saw to see just what it was I was doing so close to his land. Hello, Ed, I said in the quiet of my shut-off steel. And all I have to do is pull it out of the stream with my ATV. Yup, he said. Looks like the beetle got it, like all the others. Sometimes I think I feel one crawling up my leg. He's 93, but can still fix almost anything on his farm without any help from backing his Massey Ferguson out of a bog by chaining 6-foot logs to his high rear wheels, then creeping out to fixing his ancient half-ton truck with parts he's kept for 50 years because he knew he'd need them even more down the road than a brand new truck. We talked until it was almost dark, and a star came out in the late November sky. A breeze blew in from the north with a chill as we talked some more about this and that. I can't remember now. Be well, he said. You too, I replied. And then as he turned around after having already turned around a couple of times as if he were lost or had a few more things to say, but thought against it, he exclaimed, will you look at that? What? I asked, looking up from the ash. That bank of fog heading this way from across the field. Well, I'll be damned, I said. It's a holy ghost, the way it's floating there, the way it just appeared from out of the blue as a cloud and landed in your field like a parachute. What a sight. But he was gone, out of range. And I alone again stood weeping in the dark that was falling like a shroud, as if I were the king of these parts in my crepuscular gown, with the sound of a voice I'd never heard before calling to me then not. You know, I would love to call Brian up here, if you wouldn't mind holding up the book, Brian.
Sure, I'll stay here.
Okay. You sure?
I'm afraid I wouldn't make it up.
Oh, come on, Brian. Here it is. Brian, could you just mention what happened to this book yesterday, 2 days ago?
So it's a finalist for the the grand prize Eric Opera Award, along with about 500 other books. I got that. So
140, Brian. Anyway,
get a little gold star for that.
yeah, well, it's just this nice little plaque here. So it's the book of animals with Brian's beautiful prints. We've been, as I said, collaborating for about 30 years together. And we just started concentrating on animals 20 or more years ago without realizing we were doing a book. And so this is the result of that book. I think the best things happen that way, unconsciously. They just come together. So what I want to do is ask you, does anyone have a request, like an animal that you would like to hear about? Maybe I can find it in here, find one.
Salamanders?
I have a frog.
That'll do.
Will a frog do?
Yeah.
The lizards.
No, I have a lizard. Lizard or a frog?
Let's. Oh, okay, yeah.
You want to do the frog?
I was gonna say that.
Okay, let's see. It's actually, you know, I wrote this, I'll tell you a little secret. I wrote this as a frog, but Brian wanted it to be a toad. So it turned out to be a toad, but doesn't matter, does it? Brian, there's a big difference. There's a,
You're big funded.
so there's the toad. There's the toad. And what are they? They're a little bit more rock-like toads than frogs, you know, the way they hunched over like that. So toad. My tongue leapt out of my mouth when I lied to her and hopped away to the stream below the house. Mute then, I started to write the truth. My tongue turned wild in the stream, for which I was glad and unashamed. I listen now from my porch to the complex things it says in the distance about my heart, how hard it is to tell the truth inside my mouth, how much it needs to sing in the dark. Okay, maybe one or two more animals. Oh, someone said a lizard. We have a lizard. This is a gorgeous print that Brian did for the cover of this book, which is a lizard. Let's see. Snake, elephant, lizard, 34. This is the one I think it is. It is. Yeah, I went to divinity school for 3 years, and I was always taught, even as a kid, that the creature in the Garden of Eden was a serpent, was a snake that beguiled and seduced Eve, right? And Adam, but Eve first. But then God curses the serpent, right? So that it must eat the dirt and crawl on its belly from the time that it was exiled from the garden for all eternity. Which means what? That it must have had legs originally. That's my thinking. So this is a little poem about that. So it's called Lizard in Exegesis as Love Letter. I crept out of your dream in a phallic suit, then climbed the tree I called Do Not Eat. So when you woke, there I was in my Sunday best as a funny little guy with a complex tongue and stunted legs who spoke the double truth. I lived inside your head where I hissed, for every hex there is a blessing. I doubled as Lord and Lizard, instilling dreams in you, and then my most ironic gift, a curse, which in my love for you, I also chose to suffer by sacrificing my legs and eating dirt. I reified myself to wake you up in a form that belies the myth of our first talk. How could I be myself for even a second if I didn't also suffer? Every creature inspires another in me until so many exist, I can't remember why or how they got their beauty from the way they hurt on earth. But you, dear heart, were the wand I hid as a rib for waving my last most human trick. This was the risk I took. Forgive me for the side effects. I had no choice beyond his need for you, your slow but gorgeous hunk. Beauty was never so innocent as when he awoke to find you there. This is the tale in only orthodox terms. I was that lonely in paradise when I had legs. The snake, the serpent, was God himself. At least that's my interpretation of that poem. This is another poem from this new manuscript that I've just completed called Late Work and Early Winter. And this poem is about where I live, called Westminster West in Vermont, just on the border of Putney and Westminster West. And it has an epigraph here. Often I'm permitted to return to a meadow as if it were a given property of the mind that certain bounds hold against chaos. That's from Robert Duncan, the great poet Robert Duncan. Westminster West, Vermont, June 20th, 8:03 p.m. A brand new poem, so you know you're always a little apprehensive about reading brand new poems, but here it goes. I'm here in the meadow at dusk, listening to the songs of insects in the grass and trees that circle the meadow. A chorus of voices I join in singing with fricative sounds that fool none of them. So many songs in one, and they're singing to the sweet, inscrutable darkness that's falling like a curtain from oblivion to the meadow, here where it lands as a ubiquitous shadow that deepens on the ground, where it cools the grass and leaves and stream that runs beside the meadow at gravity's command from off the mountain, that looms like the shoulder of some Brobdingnagian god who's dreaming dramas of weather that then come true throughout the year on the stage of the meadow, on which the scions of creation reprise their lyrics of wooing in the silence and falling darkness that stirs their hearts to calling out to each other in various Edenic songs they play on the instruments of their legs, wings, and tongues, buzzing and humming, chirping and trilling, until the darkness deepens its cover at the end of evening to the blessing of night that stills them in sleep. So just a few more. I think every poet or artist should write a credo every once in a while. They're tough to write. Maybe the hardest thing to write. Credo. A little short poem. I know more than I think I do. Nothing is full of darkness. The universe fits inside my head with room to spare. This is a literal place, a paradise of endings. The sound of a falling tree goes unheard in the light of a star that no longer burns. Absence forms the shadow at the heart of light. Time is at the mercy of thought. I either live in this mercy or not, singing in the dark. This is from this new book titled In My Unknowing. And I'll read a poem here about a wonderful poet who I got to know very, very well, was very, very lucky in all these interviews I did but to sit with this person longer than any of the others I sat with, who include those wonderful poets, beginning in about 2010 or so. Senior poets I knew who aren't going to be with us much longer: Galway Connell, Lucille Clifton, Maxine Kuhman, Jack Gilbert, Bruce Stone, Robert Bly, and then some more recent poets in I Would Lie to You If I Could, or mid-career poets. This poem, though, is about Ruth Stone. Do any of you know Ruth Stone's work? Good, good. She was a great poet and wasn't appreciated enough in her lifetime. She died when she was 96. And she always used to ask me when I was sitting beside her when she was in bed, and she says, "Do you think I'll be remembered as a great poet?" And I said, "Oh, yes. Oh, yes." She suffered a lot in her life. The widow. "You get what you get when you get it," she said, when I asked her if she believed in heaven, which she didn't, but found useful to say she did in her poems. For the sake of the poem, she claimed, not heaven, but the unity of knowing and feeling, the same thing Mandelbrot found in the fractal property of self-similarity, she'd say. No different at all than the properties of her poems that just came to her. She swore from across the universe and entered her heart, where they fanned the coal of her grief over the loss of her beloved Walter. "See what you miss by being dead," she wrote to him in a poem called Curtains, as if what she called his change of means could read it still wherever he was. Her story, that is, about a crying jag she had one day when her landlord, Mr. Tempesta, yelled at her, "No pets, no pets," upon discovering her cat on the windowsill, but then relented to make her stop. She was that sad and impossibly funny at the same time, so large in her voice that sang the difficult song for two voices in one, made possible by grief. The bittersweet of her coals invisible smoke rose to her eyes and watered them, then put them out. He never even left a note, she said, just hung himself one day on the back of his office door like a coat. The poems just came to me now. The poems just come to me now from out of the blue while I'm hanging laundry or planting flowers. I never know when they're going to arrive. So if I don't run inside just then and write them down exactly as they sound, word for word, they disappear for good. Poof, I've lost most of my poems that way. Some good ones too. She was hysterical. I read just two more. I try to read poems that I haven't read before, because then you really hear them for the first time. And are sometimes shocked. And you have a whole different experience reading them that way. I was watching John Ashbery read once, and he started reading a long poem, and halfway through he just said, "Not me," and put the book down. To a Luna moth. Out of nowhere, which is everywhere, I sang to you with a tongue in the form of a leaf as you fell asleep. My love, my cynosure, my changeling, the sky is your chrysalis. So lie inside its blue long enough to feel the ribs of your wings begin to grow, then grow some more until they're long enough to form a thin, prehensile frame for the delicate veil that spans their arc with a fabric that seems too frail at first to lift you up, but does somehow, infused as it is with a tensile strength that forms in a dream inside the dark in which you fly and land and fly among the leaves, where you were born a worm and then transformed to a miracle that flies on waking a second time, as if waking were the dream and the dream the world. This last poem is a poem about Gilgamesh and his beloved friend Enkidu. There's a wonderful translation of Gilgamesh. There's a few lines. All that is left to one who grieves, no change of heart or spiritual conversion, for the heart has changed, and the soul has converted to a thing that sees how much it costs to lose a friend it loved. Tablet. That's the translation, by the way, by Herbert Mason. Oh, I think lived right here. So this is called Tablet, and it's about Gilgamesh searching for eternal life after he's lost his friend Enkidu and has visited the wise man Utnapishtim, who's told him that there's a flower that grows in the sea that if you eat the petals from it will instill you with eternal life. So he goes on this search for the flower after his grief, or during his grief for Enkidu, and after his visit with Utnapishtim. One of the oldest myths that we have extant. Uruk, of course, is Iraq, the Fertile Crescent where the Tigris and the Euphrates meet. Had the king of Uruk never wrestled Enkidu, the wild man of the steppe, and just barely defeated him on points, he never would have fallen in love with him with a love that was greater than that for a woman, nor asked him to go hunting with him in the sacred forest for the monster guardian, Umbaba. The beginning of history as an ageless story would never have happened. Had the king never suffered the loss of himself and another, he never would have known himself as someone less than himself without his beloved, nor hurt with a grief that rendered him listless, although he called his suffering nothing, with a smile to the face of the Queen of Heaven, who craved his devotion but couldn't have it, his only solace for being human. Had he never grieved so deeply, he never would have grown into the comedian he did, nor swum to the bottom of the sacred river to pick the flower that the shaman said would bless him forever, nor almost drowned while diving for the blossom with a godlike breath, nor tasted the salt in the river that cursed him with a thirst for wine and hatred of mirrors, nor mastered the art of curling his tongue around the diphthong in death, nor learned how to say the single sound of E, A, and U at the center of beauty, nor loosened his grip on the thorny flower as he slept on the beach, oblivious of the snake traversing his body, then hissing to the darkness, "Only I am eternal," nor dreamed of grilling a gazelle stewed in garlic, then eating it with his wife and children in a joyous reunion at the marble table in his hyacinth garden. Had he never slept so deeply, he would have felt the serpent absconding with a flower into the forest, where she devoured it whole and shed her skin. He never would have made his way back home with his grief for his friend, nor gained the knowledge of how to read the text of clouds as one long sentence that spelled his end, nor discovered the secret of how to string the smallest things together as he spent the rest of his life ruling his kingdom, building a wall around his city, telling stories to his brilliant children, planting his garden throughout the morning, happy with his title, comedian king, lying in his hammock, dreaming and waking, waking and dreaming. Thank you.
So I'm going to share from a work that is forthcoming, a chapbook I'm working on, get to that. And for my second book, Black Metamorphoses, which I consider to be what I like to call an interpretation, interrogation, and conversation, because it's one thing to interpret something, and this is my phone line to Ovid, but it's another thing to also interrogate an open conversation and raise questions and inquiry. Ovid and I have been spending a lot of time together. In the beginning, that hunger, thirst, lust, want, and no letters contained what was about to happen. My bones traveled ragged, tongue twisted, torn, gone, body unburied. They said this is where the fever started, thirst unquenched. The way to mama's place is fuzzy. They teach me coordinates to a new place. Was I mitochondrial Eve's cursed brood? They said I could learn to speak like them. If I be and do, then I too could. Book 1. 2 questions that only could be answered one way. Are you dreaming? Are you awake? No. One of the things that I was interested in is ensuring that people didn't feel like they had to have an intimate or known relationship with Ovid in order to read this, but perhaps leave breadcrumbs in between. And so what I did and with this is thinking about the underneath of what Ovid was getting to in terms of power, dynamics, gender, and how in my interpretation and interrogation and conversation with his work, thinking about cannibalism and hunger and what happens when a group hungers and has a hunger that's unquenchable. What did that look like within the context of colonialism and imperialism? Hunger like her mama, most strong and white gaze as in a cowbird's flirtation, sprouted in eyes to tongues to bellies pregnant with stolen milk to restless hands. These fingernails filled with black bodies scraping to get back to forgotten. Here, the gods of this new world demanded. Erython seed. Before, brown bodies dealt in brown bodies. Before the Portuguese, before Europe knew little about black, how it lingers on the tongue. Erython pulled hunger out of his bowels, figuring, if I can't soothe her, I'll marry her. We can eat the world together. Eyes taste beginning, make new worlds. Hands taste bodies, make new narrative. Black bodies, a synonym for empire. They birthed many. Arc of agony, ocean, hunger, terror, bomb. Ifeanyi tells the tale. Captain threatens to eat me. Vanished bodies continue to tell. From Lion Mountains to roar of thunder, to land of burnt face, to corridor of camps. These be the ministers of destruction. Merchants of doom, soul carriers, fleshmongers, he who butchers bodies, demons of desolation, priests of wreckage, flesh eaters, magicians. The stories remain in the bones of bodies blessed black. Ifeanyi said what others said, what Geronimo warned. Wide eyes, they speak hunger. Wide eyes, they be danger. Arc of agony fed on howls, screams, and stench. His empty bellyful needs more bodies. The demons of desolation, still more bodies. From oil to anything, barnacles scrape, candle wax to leather. The crew of Peggy, that crew of Francis Tiger, others on Nantucket's Essex knew the rule. What's at sea stays at sea. When all else fails at sea, fake a draw to decide. When all else fails, feed from a stolen body. Ocean swallowed the unwanteds. He took children, he took women, swallowed the old, swallowed infants, ate the sick, mouth open wide to all who said they'd fly back. But bones don't stop singing, sang loudest in water. Black bodies become whale fall. Those bones be the Bimini Road from there to here. Lil Burns playscape better than a formal ball. Black body wonderland, body bound to plank, fire high, axe in hand. Others chose urge at arm's length, handcuff them to a bedpost. Other chose to feed bodies to the cotton gin. Terror stretched across the new world, rivaling her brothers and sisters. Necks, knuckles, limbs of all kinds, skin, scalps, skulls, blood, most preferred. A feast of flayed men that rivaled Aztec tradition. Skin as shoes, skin as money purse, skin, the inheritance given to white children. Leatherface be no fiction, but old deity. Leatherface, one of the eternal hungry, a sacrifice to shallow graves of many bodies, bodies of no bury. Nat Turner and Sam Hose, constellation points to all the others. Taste turn unstoppable, cause we can dine on Black bodies for generations. Bomb took no form. Endless appetite like her kin, took anything in the ministry of feel good, human fat to soothe the bruise, a mortar pestle skull to dull heads ache, king's drops with wine or chocolate, mommy's helper turned mummy fever, human flesh to tongue to cure, nothing new, appetites be not created, crave, be grown. Something about diamonds, rubber, cocoa, something about cotton, copper, tin, tea, all them spices, unbroken from the boy somewhere in Texas in 2016. He tells his class, I've got a leather purse made of black skin. Gotten from great-grand to papa, soon it'll be his. Man handing hunger to man, forgetting why they were trying to get back to the gods of names forgotten, invoking seasoning, adding years, feeding tongues to language, hang a live Black body in a smokehouse or in a kitchen, use pepper, use salt, add vinegar, add coal oil, add some turpentine, whatever will do for a Black body, whatever is sanctioned from the old world. Hunger left Erisathan, birthed twins, lust and appetite on her own. They wanted to know, you got room for what tickles your tongue? Black body, no silent cuisine. Black body demands, you got room for in your belly? Atlas, what about the rainbow serpent? Something about Hercules joining caused Atlas to shift his burden of punishment. Something like daddy issues, mommy issues, a Greek man's burden. I heard of a rainbow serpent holding not just an edge, but all of creation along with looted bodies from there to here, here, and here, scattered like seed. How long can a tail be held by tip in one's own mouth? Talk about burden. How long can one body bend to hold stolen children, the weight of bones, original names, and I do want to give a shout out, which I do apologize, I want to start with this. You have a local treasure in our midst, my very dear friend Lenny, who is a poet in her own right. And so, yeah, don't miss out on that treasure. I think what I'm going to do is I'll read, I'm going to switch over, read a couple of pieces, and then wrap up. Maybe switch back and end with Black Metamorphosis. So this is out of my forthcoming chapbook. This is how they teach you how to want it, the slaughter. What's so fascinating about slaughter and killing. I just recently, I hope my friend won't be mad at this, I think she's watching, very eye-opening experience to talk with a 10-year-old brown girl, and her asking, you know, why do they want to kill us? And having this conversation, and she wanted answers. So I thank her actually in that conversation for helping to shine some light on finishing up this work that's forthcoming. This also is about our relationship to often what gets on our plates, even if it's not meat, and how we eat invisible hands or hunt each other, or bodies hunted, whether it is literal or metaphorical, the race or intimate relations, everything in between. Granny aged at least, eyes exposed, more white her mouth slight open, the way an orgasm's not escaped through that hole and ever, the way it escapes now, like I have something good to feed her in a place that serves no food. I tell her we stood in the wrong place for that and someplace else. I let her when no one else was looking and someplace else. I take secret delight, no difference split between the one who is slay maker and the body that made it so. My hair, a white woman's orgasm, my body, the bridge to her, to tell them how close she got. Her tips of fingers tingled to toes as she talks to a room whose tongues become wet and wanting as she tells them. I got so close I could. Granny got no way to flesh help. She'll settle for scalp. Granny got no way to the wolf, or better yet, a brick lair, to lay a path straight from slaughter to plate. Better yet, it's Granny whose hands were the paws, whose jaw always could unhinge, wide, locked open for prey. Cautionary note on baited flesh. Some hunger is a taught thing. Some hunger demands questions, never exchanging a name and answer. What is it? How it came to be? When's the next one? I licked air, gathered heartbeats. I smell the sounds. My fur, it knows. Didn't your mama teach you about baiting a starved one, a hungry one, about how to leave your stomach ripped raw, unending ache, about how to manage the tingle of fingers that speak that kind of need? Been listening to a podcast in fiction, and what's interesting, and the thing I think about hunters as well, no judgment towards them, I don't know about that life, but it's very interesting that when you consume, it hangs a question of, will you be consumed by the thing you're trying to consume? And are you building a deity instead of actually, in the power dynamic as a hunter, when you study and stalk something and think that you've won by catching and getting it? I think I'll end with, I'll read two more. Nat Turner's wisdom. A fanatic for the way I knew, blood on corn, heaven's dew, the way earth spun, the shift in seasons, for the way I read time telling masters can be slayed with their own tools. I tended my garden of death. Pruning begot pruning, yet I brought back the memory of berserk. Monster, my skin, familial keepsakes, fat from body, now oil and soap, all eternal reminders, posing the question, who's the real monster? Who's the obsessed, true berserker? When God, a moment or vision says, gimme from scalp to toenail, skin to bones, be ready. Risks demand surrender of self whole, faith beyond prayer. Taking what is decreed at birth, it was always mine. As for when, don't let anyone tell you now isn't it. Finish for last one. Coda, origin story. Stealing sprouts intimacy, foundation laid for contagion. I am devoured. I am thirst unquenched. Coordinates lost to mamas. I've memorized every room in your house. I've built the blueprint. I am mitochondrial Eve, squat wide in day's death. I am the child retracing buried placenta. I am sister to Atunda, he who broke and birthed gods. I knew you were coming. Through tongue, through eyes, through ears, I entered, through pores of skin. I am your interior, your fever eternal. You saw, opened wide, as I knew you'd come. I won't travel you ragged, won't twist and tear your tongue. Give me your children. I'm taking your children. Your appetite grew me up. That hunger, thirst, lust, wants, and there is no language, no alphabet contains what I'm doing. Thank you.
Let's have another round of applause for these wonderful poets, Partridge Boswell, Chard DeNiord, and Shanta Lee. So two quick notes before we close. First off, all the books are for sale. So talk to James and
Mine is the second reprint, so like I haven't out of books and I'm hoping to draft some off because I travel New England often, so.
okay,
Or online.
awesome. Thanks for telling us. And also, James has arranged these chairs. It's a major labor of love for him that he does before every poetry reading. And if y'all could fold them and stack them on the side, that would be great. Or you cannot, and we'll just stay here late and do it. But thank y'all very much again.
Thank you all. It was beautiful.
Yeah.